The echo of his laughter still vibrated in the air, a cruel, mocking sound that promised ruin. "Good luck paying the bills without me, Elara." Mark had practically sung it. His face flushed with a triumphant glee I'd never seen before. He stood in the doorway, suitcase in hand, a caricature of a man who just won the lottery, not one who was about to walk out on 6 years of shared life. My jaw was clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. 6 years. 6 years of building something, brick by brick, dream by dream. And now, in a single gut-wrenching moment, it was all reduced to this. His taunting exit, his casual dismissal of our interwoven lives. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with a raw, unfamiliar rage that simmered beneath my skin. He paused, one hand on the doorknob, reveling in the silence that followed his pronouncement. He expected tears, I knew it. He expected a collapse, a desperate plea for him to stay. He always did. But not this time. This time, there was only the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the distant city sounds, and the deafening beat of my own heart. His smirk widened. "Cat, got your tongue? Or are you just calculating how many hours you'll have to work at that pathetic little gallery to keep this place afloat?" He gestured around the living room, a space we'd painstakingly decorated, filled with flea market finds and carefully chosen art. Each item now felt like a punch to the gut, a relic of a future that would never be. My gaze drifted to the stack of envelopes on the coffee table. The hydro bill, the internet bill, the rent, so many bills. Bills he always claimed to manage, bills he often forgot to pay until the last minute, leaving me to scramble. He always acted like he was the sole provider, the one holding everything together, even though my pathetic little gallery often brought in more steady income than his sporadic freelance projects. He must have read the doubt in my eyes, because he let out another laugh, a short, sharp bark. "Yeah, think about it, Elara. This place isn't cheap. And without my generous contributions." He trailed off, letting the implication hang heavy in the air. He thought he had me. He thought he had me cornered, financially dependent, broken. But then a flicker, a tiny, almost imperceptible spark of an idea ignited in the back of my mind. It started small, a whisper, and then it grew, blossoming into a full-blown realization that sent a jolt through me. My eyes, which had been fixed on the bills, slowly lifted to meet his. The smirk on his face faltered, just for a second. He saw something there, something he hadn't anticipated. It wasn't despair. It wasn't defeat. It was something else. Something he couldn't quite place. I felt a ghost of a smile touch my own lips. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a cold, knowing smile. A smile that promised a reckoning. His hand tightened on the doorknob. "What is it?" he asked, a hint of unease creeping into his voice. I took a deep breath and then very slowly I said, "You know, Mark," and I let my gaze sweep around the room, taking in every detail, every piece of our shared history. "You're right. This place isn't cheap." I paused, letting the silence build. "But then again," I continued, my voice gaining strength, each word a deliberate, precise stroke, "my name is on all the rental contracts." The color drained from his face. His jaw, which had been set in that arrogant smirk, sagged. The triumphant gleam in his eyes vanished, replaced by a dawning horror. The suitcase slipped from his grasp, hitting the floor with a dull thud. The echo of his laughter was gone, replaced by the profound, chilling silence of a man who had just realized he had made the biggest mistake of his life. I can certainly proceed with the story. Here's part 2. Part 2, the unraveling. The suitcase lay inert on the polished hardwood, a silent testament to his abrupt departure and even more abrupt realization. Mark stood frozen, his eyes wide and unblinking, fixed on me as if I'd suddenly grown a second head. The arrogant confidence that had defined his every movement just moments before had completely evaporated, replaced by a raw, unadulterated panic. "What are you talking about?" he finally stammered. His voice thin and reedy, a stark contrast to the booming laughter that had filled the room. "That's impossible." I handled all the paperwork. I signed everything. I crossed my arms, a slow, deliberate movement that felt incredibly powerful. Did you, Mark? Did you really? I let a beat of silence hang in the air, watching him squirm. Or did you just think you did? He took a shaky step back, his gaze darting around the room as if searching for an escape, for a loophole that wasn't there. He always prided himself on being the sensible one, the financially astute half of our relationship. He loved to explain how he'd negotiated this deal or that, how he'd saved us money. And I, admittedly, had let him. I'd been busy with the gallery, with my art, trusting him with the practicalities. A trust, it now seemed, he had systematically eroded. The initial lease, yes, I continued, my voice steady, almost conversational. You signed that. But remember when we renewed it 2 years ago? The landlord insisted on electronic signatures this time, for efficiency. You were too busy, remember? Swamped with that big freelance project that never quite materialized. My tone was laced with a bitterness I couldn't quite mask. So I did it. I read through every page carefully. And I made sure both our names were on the digital agreement. His mouth opened and closed, no words coming out. He was reliving it, I could see it in his eyes. The hurried, "Just sign it, babe, I trust you," he'd mumbled from behind his laptop screen. The casual wave of his hand when I'd asked if he wanted to review the terms. He'd been so sure of his control, so dismissive of my involvement. And then, I pressed on, stepping closer, enjoying the way he instinctively recoiled. The utilities. The internet. The electricity. You delegated those to me too, didn't you? Said I was better with details. More organized. I scoffed softly. So I set up the accounts. My name. All of them. The reality of the situation hit him like a physical blow. His face crumpled. He was picturing it, the endless forms, the customer service calls, the direct debits linked to my bank account. He wasn't the one holding the purse strings. He was the one being cut off. So, good luck paying the bills without me, you said? I repeated his earlier words, letting them hang in the now heavy air. The truth is, Mark, I have been paying the majority of the bills for quite some time now. Your contributions have been sporadic at best. And now that you're leaving, I gestured vaguely towards the door, you're just making my life simpler. Less financial deadweight. He finally found his voice, though it was barely a whisper. But the deposit. I paid the deposit. Half of it, I corrected, a sharp glint in my eye. And yes, it was transferred from your account. But guess whose name is on the refund clause? Because, again, I was the one who actually read the contract. His shoulders slumped. The image of the conquering hero, the man in control, had completely shattered. He looked small, pathetic, standing there amidst the ruins of his own carefully constructed delusion. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. He stared at the floor, at the suitcase, at anything but me. I watched him, devoid of pity. Only a grim satisfaction remained. He had tried to crush me, to leave me feeling worthless and abandoned. But he had forgotten one crucial detail. I was not the fragile, dependent woman he had always imagined. I was the one who had quietly, diligently, built a foundation beneath us, a foundation he was now powerless to shake. He finally looked up, his eyes pleading, desperate. Ilara, wait. We can talk about this. We can figure something out. But the time for talking was over. The time for figuring things out had passed the moment he'd laughed in my face. The desperation in his eyes was almost comical, if I hadn't been so utterly numb to it. Figure something out. I echoed, the words flat and devoid of emotion. You just figured out that you don't want to be here, Mark. You just figured out that my existence was a burden you no longer wished to carry. My voice remained steady, a feat of self-control I hadn't known I possessed. And now that you've figured that out, I suggest you continue with your plan. He stammered. No, Ilara, that's not. I didn't mean it like that. I was angry. We can fix this. You and me. This apartment. We've built so much here. His gaze swept around the living room, frantic, as if the familiar furniture might offer him some solace, some argument. We built it, yes. I agreed, a faint, bitter smile touching my lips. But it seems only one of us bothered to secure the foundations. I walked over to the stack of bills on the coffee table, picked up the top one, the rent, and tapped it with a perfectly manicured finger. This is due next week. And it's in my name. The lease, the utilities, the internet, all of it. So you see, Mark, you haven't taken anything from me. You've simply removed yourself from a financial obligation that you were, frankly, barely upholding anyway. His face contorted in a mixture of disbelief and fury. The initial panic was giving way to something uglier. You planned this, didn't you? You deliberately set me up. I simply raised an eyebrow. Is that what you think? That after 6 years I somehow orchestrated your dramatic exit just so I could... What? Keep paying all the bills myself? Or perhaps, Mark, I was simply being responsible. Something you might want to try sometime. He scoffed, a pathetic attempt to regain some semblance of his former arrogance. Fine. If that's how you want to play it. This place is too expensive for one person anyway. You'll be begging me to come back when you're eating ramen noodles for a month straight. Oh, I doubt that, I said, my voice dangerously calm. My gallery has been doing quite well, actually. And without your, shall we say, questionable spending habits, I imagine I'll be quite comfortable. Besides, I added, gesturing towards his forgotten suitcase, you seem to have forgotten something rather important. His eyes followed my gaze to the suitcase, then back to me. A flicker of something new crossed his face. Not panic, not anger, but a profound, chilling sense of defeat. He was realizing the full extent of his miscalculation. He had envisioned me devastated, homeless, calling him in tears. Instead, I was standing here, poised, in control of the very space he thought he owned. He bent down slowly, picked up the suitcase, his movements stiff and uncertain. He didn't look at me as he straightened up. He just shuffled towards the door. The man who had walked in minutes ago with a swagger and a cruel laugh was gone. In his place was a shell, deflated and empty. He reached the threshold, paused for a split second, then stepped out. The door clicked shut behind him, a quiet, definitive sound that sealed the end of our story. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the silence. It wasn't the silence of abandonment or despair. It was the silence of an empty space, waiting to be filled. Not with a person but with potential. Clean slate. Beginning. I walked over to the coffee table and picked up the rental contract. My name clear and bold at the top. Lara Vance. Homeowner. The click of the door was still echoing in the apartment, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in the air. I stood there, rooted to the spot, the rental contract still in my hand. It wasn't triumph I felt, not really. It was a strange, unsettling mixture of emptiness and exhilaration. Emptiness for the 6 years, the shared dreams, the comfortable routine that had just evaporated. And exhilaration for the sudden, boundless expanse of possibility stretching out before me. I walked to the window, pulled back the curtain. The city outside Junjiai was bathed in the warm late afternoon light. The familiar streets and buildings, once a backdrop to our shared life, now looked different. They looked like a blank canvas, waiting for new colors, new strokes. My pathetic little gallery was just a few blocks away. It was small, intimate, tucked away on a quiet side street. For years, it had been my sanctuary, a place where I could lose myself in the vibrant world of art, far from Mark's dismissive comments and constant need for validation. It was where I truly came alive, curating emerging local artists, organizing small, meaningful exhibitions, and connecting with people who understood the silent language of creativity. Mark had always scoffed at it, calling it a hobby that paid for itself, barely. He never truly understood the passion, the quiet joy, the sense of purpose it gave me. He saw only the bottom line, and even then, he was usually wrong about it. I had been making more than enough to cover my half of the bills, and often more than that. He just never wanted to acknowledge it, because it would undermine his carefully constructed narrative of being the sole breadwinner. I turned from the window, my gaze sweeping over the living room. It was too big for one person, he'd said. Too expensive. But was it? I mentally ran through my gallery's recent sales, the commissions I had lined up, the new artists I was excited to feature. I had been conservative in my estimations for so long, always holding back, afraid to fully embrace the success because it might challenge Mark's fragile ego. Now there was no ego to protect but my own. I walked over to the sound system, a gift from my parents years ago, something Mark had always considered too loud or too distracting. I put on a jazz album, something soulful and improvisational. The music filled the space, chasing away the lingering silence of Mark's absence. It felt liberating, like breathing fresh air after being cooped up for too long. Then I went into the kitchen. My kitchen. No longer cluttered with his forgotten coffee cups or his half-eaten snacks. I opened the fridge. Half empty, but what was there was mine. No more compromises on grocery lists. No more arguments about organic produce being a waste of money. A sense of calm settled over me. This was it. The next chapter. It wouldn't be easy. There would be moments of loneliness, sure. Moments where I would question if I had done the right thing. But there would also be freedom, and autonomy, and the undeniable satisfaction of knowing that I, Elara Vance, was standing on my own 2 feet, in my own apartment, charting my own course. The rent was due next week. I would pay it, in time, with my money. And it would be the first of many such payments, each one a small victory, a quiet declaration of independence. The future, for the first time in a long time, felt like an unpainted canvas, and I, the artist, held the brush. The jazz music played on, a mellow, comforting soundtrack to my new reality. The initial surge of adrenaline had begun to wane, replaced by a quiet determination. Mark was gone. The apartment was mine. The bills were mine. And the future, for the first time in years, was unequivocally, deliciously mine. I walked through the apartment not like an occupant, but like an explorer mapping new territory. In the kitchen, I opened the old, somewhat cluttered pantry. Mark's half-empty bags of chips and stale cookies sat next to my carefully organized spices and specialty teas. It was time for a purge. I started tossing items into a bin, the satisfying thud of each discarded packet a small act of reclamation. No more passive-aggressive comments about my weird health food. This space would reflect my tastes, my choices. Moving into the small office space, I looked at the desk we'd shared. His side was a mess of tangled wires and outdated tech magazines. My side, meticulously organized with art supplies, sketches, and business ledgers for the gallery. I pulled out a large, empty storage box. All his things, his books, his old gaming consoles. They would be packed away. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. This entire apartment needed to breathe my air. The thought of an empty wall or a newly organized shelf felt incredibly freeing. I could finally hang that oversized abstract piece I'd been working on in the living room. The one Mark said was too much. I could repaint the bedroom a calm, deep blue instead of the beige he insisted on. The possibilities were endless, and each one hummed with the promise of self-expression. I picked up my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and found the number for my best friend, Sophia. She'd been a quiet rock throughout the slow, agonizing decline of my relationship with Mark, listening patiently to my frustrations, offering gentle, non-judgmental advice. She deserved to know. "Hey," I said, a slight tremor in my voice as she answered. "It's done. He's gone." There was a beat of surprised silence on the other end. "Elara, oh my God, are you okay? Do you want me to come over?" Her voice was laced with immediate concern. "I'm surprisingly okay," I admitted, a genuine smile finally breaking through. "More than okay, actually. You know that whole good luck paying the bills without me thing." "Yeah," she said, her tone cautious. "The usual Mark theatrics." "Well," I said, a little laugh escaping, Turns out my name is on all the rental contracts, and the utilities, and everything else. Another moment of silence, then a whoop of pure delight from Sophia. No way. Lara, that's amazing. You're brilliant. He actually fell for it. He did, I confirmed, picturing his stunned face. He left his suitcase, came back for it, looked like he'd seen a ghost. Good, Sophia declared with satisfaction. He deserved it. So what now? Now, I said, looking around my apartment, no longer feeling small within its walls but rather like a captain on her own ship. Now I start fresh. Focus on the gallery, on my art, on me, and on getting rid of all his hideous stuff. Sophia added, her excitement contagious. Exactly, I laughed. Want to come help me paint the living room this weekend? I'm thinking something bold. Something that screams, Elara. You know it, she replied, her voice brimming with support. This is going to be good, Elara. Really, really good.